Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk to you today about wastefulness and the infinite growth paradigm. Where should I start with this subject? I've talked before about wastefulness. I've talked about how stupid it is for companies to make phone books where they waste paper on trees and they give them to everybody, and how it would be better to just let people get their phone books for themselves, like leave them at the post office. I think I've talked about how grocery stores, like some of them, have like a lot of exotic foods like bok choys and like a lot of nuts. Like these huge bins of different kinds of nuts. And I don't know how fresh you can keep nuts, but if nobody's buying those nuts, just to have the options of having different kinds of, like, all over the world, like different kinds of vegetables, like fresh vegetables, stacks of them in grocery stores all over the United States. Like, people, I don't know that many people that would eat like a bok choy or something like a weird Brazilian nut. I'm not going to the grocery store to buy a bunch of Brazilian nuts, so I'm imagining most of that food gets thrown out because it's just there to show that, hey, this is a store that has a lot of options. In case one day you happen to want a fucking Brazil nut or a bok choy, it's going to be there. Even though every day we're going to throw out a couple hundred just for that one guy, maybe one day in the year he might buy one. So, wastefulness, right? Somebody was talking to me about, I don't know if it's true or not, but somebody in Canada said that we had left we were doing military exercises in Canada, and we packed all of our shit up and we brought it all back to the United States, and we left like a brand new M60 tank there, which I don't even know if that's a real thing. I don't know about an M60 tank, because M60 is a gun. Let me look that up. Okay, an M60 is a real tank. Okay, but anyway, he said they had this whole brand new M60 tank left in Canada, shrink wrapped, they just forgot to take. And the guy calls the general, whoever was in charge of this, and the guy says, I don't want to go back for it, just destroy it, because he didn't give a fuck. And he was asking me, is like America really that kind of throwaway society? And I was like, yeah, because what we do is we throw shit away and we make more because we're on this infinite growth paradox, or paradigm. It's both paradox and a paradigm, technically. Because the way I see it, the reason we go to wars and stuff is so we can use up military equipment like tanks, guns, ammunition, artillery shells, bombs, whatever. And we have all these things, the military-industrial complex has to rebuild all this stuff because everybody's too chicken shit to just say, hey, let's just take all of our excess wealth and our surpluses, we'll hold on to them, and any excess money we have we'll just give to the people, we'll divide it up amongst everybody, because that's socialism or communism. Nobody likes to be called a communist. So what we do is we have to invent reasons to just waste shit like crazy, send it overseas, kill lots of innocent men, children, foreigners that don't even know. Like, I've heard people in Afghanistan don't even know, like, some of them don't even know they're in Afghanistan. They don't know it's their country because they're just people that were born on a farm in the middle of the fucking desert, and they just farm for animals and they survive, and they don't really go to school, they don't have maps, they don't care about arbitrary lines that some guy, like, I think Winston Churchill drew the lines for Afghanistan and Pakistan years ago, and they don't even know. They're not aware of politics or that they're in a country. They're just people that just live on the world. And they're getting blown up, and they have no idea why. They don't know that they're at war. They don't know what America is. They don't know why the war is going on or why people are coming into their country and shooting them in the face. So that's just all reasons for Americans to invent, like, destroy things so we can rebuild it. Possibly, anyway. So, wastefulness. Huge waste of life and resources and crap just because people are too chicken shit. Also, it's the politicians that don't want to be called communists and socialists because it gives their friends in the military-industrial complex jobs to build things that they waste and they throw away and they give up. And they also spend way too much money on a lot of things. Like, I've heard stories of like $1,000 pencils or ink pens and just office equipment that they pay too much for. Toilet paper rolls are like $100 each because they just have a line item list of stuff and they just sign off on it and they don't look at the prices. They don't go compare it to other stores or what it costs in real life, and they just sign off on these huge military expenses and they lose billions of dollars just randomly, just like a big pallet full of fucking cash just gets lost somewhere and there's billions just gone. Who knows where it went. But then the politicians also have to keep their jobs by providing this reason to waste shit because they don't look like communists. That keeps their jobs and it keeps their friends in jobs. Because everybody right now is worried to death about losing their jobs, right? Anyway, I was listening to Howard Stern the other day, and he had this crazy right-wing woman on there that was like singing this song about the war, and soldiers are giving their sacrifices for us to have our freedoms, and I was like pissed off, of course, because that's not true. Since like Pearl Harbor, we haven't had to defend any freedoms because nobody's really attacked America except for 9/11, which all the attackers died immediately, so it wasn't really an attack. It's over as soon as it began. And sending people over to another country to invade them isn't defending any freedom, because for freedom to be at risk, it has to be something has to be at stake. They're not attacking our country, so unless somebody's invading our country and like constantly putting us in peril of losing our freedom or our country, then they're not fighting for it, in my opinion. Huge waste. But anyway, I was wondering about this thing about, she says it's a sacrifice for our freedoms, right? And I wonder if there's a connection between conservatism and religion, as far as maybe they think sending soldiers to war is like a sacrifice, as in the past we had religious sacrifices. We had blood sacrifices to make sure the rain came, to feed the crops, and all this other kind of sacrifice to ensure people lived like good lives. Like, I wonder if they think every so often you have to just have a war, send people to die as some kind of offering or sacrifice just to keep your freedoms. Because if you think about it, Ronald Reagan had the Cold War, and then you had George Bush Sr. with the Iraq War, or Desert Storm, and then you had Clinton really didn't do much, except for like, there was a thing with Kosovo and Mogadishu and Somalia. Those are like really minor incidences, I think. I mean, I haven't really seen the movie Black Hawk Down, so I don't really know much about it. But Clinton might not have been that bad of a president because he was like an actual Democrat. And then you had George Bush Jr., obviously, with Iraq and Afghanistan, all over the place with war. And then you have Obama, which is, people say he's like a shield for the Republicans because he says a bunch of Democratic things to get elected, and then he acts like a Republican, and he keeps us in war, and we're still going on with wars. Like, we've been in war pretty much as long as I've been born, except Clinton was kind of like a little bit of a drop-off there, but we've just constantly been sending people to die in other countries, and we've never been attacked since like 1945 or something when Pearl Harbor happened. Well, except 9/11, which obviously was over immediately, so it just seems weird to me. But here's the problem with the infinite growth paradigm. Natural things have an ebb and a flow. Tides come in, tides go out. It rains, it evaporates. You have waves that rise and they fall. There's like ups and downs in life. There's not like an infinitely rising. Ultimately, it leads to destruction when you do. You can't just infinitely grow and infinitely keep rising and forever, because, like, take human population. If we just kept rising every year, which we're doing right now, by the way, if we just keep rising every year, we're going to overpopulate the planet. There's not physically enough land for enough people to live on the planet if you just keep rising. Which is why eventually you have huge die-offs in fish populations and things. But a really good example of this was in this new Michael Rupert Collapse documentary about peak oil, how we've used up all the oil that there is. And like when I was growing up, I remember people used to like drive around just for the fun of it. People used to just go cruising. They'd find a place where teenagers hung out, and they would just drive back and forth up and down the road, wasting gas and cruising because that's what you did. And since the car was invented in the last 50, 100 years, we've used up all the oil that has been created since, you know, the dinosaurs and shale oil and microcosmic or microorganisms in the ocean were, they have to die off over millions of years to create oil, and now we've used all of it up pretty much. And this Michael Rupert documentary goes into detail about like how much it costs to actually drill offshore into the ocean. Like, it's supposedly, it costs like so much that you don't actually make much money off of it. Just building a platform out in the ocean and constantly having to maintain that costs more than actually what you would get from it. But we do need that oil that's down there just to keep people from panicking and like freaking out because we're running out of oil, and keep people driving cars. Which in the next probably 30 years we won't even have any gasoline left, and we'll not be driving cars anymore. We'll be riding horses unless we figure something else out. Which shouldn't really be a big deal. I think there's already technology like hydrogen and like different kind of alternate fuels that work, but they've been suppressed by the big oil companies and stuff because they don't want to lose their money. So we might be fine, who knows. But another example of this I could give you is recently this year we've had a really mild winter, right? It hasn't snowed but maybe twice. Once was like this week, I think. Maybe did like a half an inch at most. And then back in January, it snowed maybe a half an inch. So last year, we had a pretty bad winter, I guess, and we had a salt shortage, right? The companies that drive the trucks around in the streets, keep them clean, and they spray salt everywhere, they pretty much ran out of salt, and they started using some kind of different kind of glaze that they put on the highways to keep them from being too slick, right? This year, they have like these huge salt piles that are like accumulated. They're surpluses that they don't have anything to do because there's a really mild winter, and they have like a budget every year, so they have so much salt for a year. So what happens is we get like a little bit of snowfall. It's not even accumulated on the ground yet, and these fuckers are driving around the parking lots spraying salt everywhere. Like where I worked, it looked like a fucking margarita glass, and you track this snow in on your shoes. It gets all over the place on your carpets. It gets on your cars. Your cars look like fucking margarita glasses, and just salt all clogging up. My windshield wiper fluid can't get out because there's salt accumulating in it. Fucks up the paint jobs everywhere. This is all because these fucking government workers are so hard up for money because there haven't been any huge snowfalls this year that they have to use up this salt, and they're just freaking out. And they're like, oh, it's snowing a little bit, head out and just spray salt everywhere. If we just saved this salt, then the next time you would have a shortage, you wouldn't have a fucking shortage. But it's this infinite growth paradigm where everybody has to use stuff up, and everybody has this yearly budget thing. In business, what happens is you have a budget that you have to spend your budget in order to get an increased budget because you want to make more money every year. Infinite growth. You can't make more money every year forever and just constantly make more money and more money, more money. You got to have like a peak year and you have a low year, and your peak year makes up for your low year and it keeps you at a nice mean average. What's wrong with that? Why can't people just live at a nice little average? I don't get it. People just have no concept of saving things anymore. And they don't care about resources like farmers. I've been watching these animal rights videos about sheep in like Australia or New Zealand or something, that they've genetically bred them to have extra folds of skin so they have extra wool. And what happens is there's so much fucking wool on these sheep now because they've been infinitely trying to grow them to have more and more wool per sheep. The flies get underneath their skin and lay eggs, and they eat them from the inside out, and then they can't ship because there's so much wool in their assholes. The farmers are chopping off their fucking ass cheeks, like the whole chunks of flesh off of these sheep, and they just leave them out and fucking rot in the sun. They're dragging them around by their legs and chopping off their asses and shit, and it's just gross. This is the kind of fucked up shit that happens when you have infinite growth. Like, it's a culture we live in, that everything has to be more and more and more every fucking year. But that's my little rant about wastefulness and infinite growth. Also, a little news. Anybody that wanted to be in my podcast, the Sex Podcast, I have sent a message to a 14-year-old Canadian girl and Tina Gilmore from the Gilmore Saga. So if we get those two people on the podcast, should be very interesting. And I think Feltzer, LeafN89, is going to be in it. And so that's like 2 Canadians and 2 Americans, counting me. So if we've got like another American, maybe would be good, but I don't know. But the TV podcast got me and Rampage, and I need a couple more people to volunteer for that. I'd like to get Spam in the Sex Podcast, but he didn't want to be on a podcast for some reason. But I need a couple more people to volunteer for the TV podcast. Anybody that like watches a lot of TV shows, especially if you got somebody that like watches Disney shows, because I don't know much about the whole Disney culture and teenage bullshit with TV. So anybody that wants to volunteer for that, I need to check the comments on the last video because I might have people in there. So yeah, the podcast will probably be this week or next week, whenever I can schedule it and make time for it. But I probably won't be able to stream it live because I can't figure out how to get the Skype audio from my microphone and the Skype to come through and play over a live stream. Like I see Joe Rogan do it, but he has people come over to his house, so they're all like physically in the same place, which is why he can do that. I've tried virtual audio cable, and it's really weird. I don't know. There might be a way to do it, and I just don't know. But anyway, that's it.